but in particular in designing the tax policy and the ability to tax capital income, for instance, that could be a game changer. And I'm extremely glad that with the partners, we have a few action points in our action plan dealing with these issues.
Thank you, Sophie, and welcome, Pascal. Good timing. Let me bring the UN perspective here. Digitizing tax administration, no question about it, and I agree with Vitor, that's leapfrogging. Many developing countries, especially LDCs, can go straight to digitization, tax administration, instead of going through the stages of paper and then digital tax filing, monitoring. And that, I think, many countries are aspiring to achieve, and all of us are helping them in building that capacity. Taxation of the digital economy is a very different problem, and I think Pascal raised, there are two fundamental questions that we are struggling with. And you will see this, actually it's becoming more complex when you go to low-income countries and countries which are still in fragile situations. The two matters are, one, who will determine this profit is taxable? And that issue is handled very differently depending on who do you talk to, because we are questioning the fundamental principles we have used so far, the physical presence principle. Second, which Pascal mentioned, then you also have to establish the taxation rights. And this conversation, and we commend the work that OECD has done so far, this conversation has to happen, and this inclusive framework is also a very good development. But this conversation has to happen where everyone can speak. And let me be very clear, there are countries who do not even understand what actually it means in terms of revenue mobilization if digital economy has to be taxed. So the discussion as of now is among a small group of countries who really grasp the situation. Others are watching and listening. How will they eventually be impacted? I think that's where the platform's role becomes critical, to mobilize countries to first understand the problem and then also provide solutions which reflect their priorities. We actually had a conversation among the group of experts, the UN Committee on Tax Matters, where South Africa, India, they shared their experiences. And they have not been, and these are big countries, the BRICS, they have not been able to grapple with this issue in a very convincing manner so far. They do not know how much revenue is leaving their borders, data as a product is generating profits. So I think taxing digital economy is opening questions which we thought we had settled 50 years ago. Now we need to look at them collectively. And OECD's work is one input which, as a platform, we welcome, but we need to expand this conversation. Thank you.
If I may, I think that the point that has just been made is extremely important. Work by Mikin and colleagues has shown that international tax spillovers are more important for developing countries than for the average advanced economy. When we think about the financing needs associated with sustainable development goals, we also see that the challenge of upgrading tax capacity is particularly demanding for that group of countries. So, since we have the Sustainable Development Goals 2030 as an ambition of the world as a whole, it's absolutely crucial, and one of the objectives of the PCT, that the interests and the perspectives of developing countries are brought to bear in this crucial set of debates around international tax. So I'm agreeing with you, Navid.
That's great. That's a question I wanted to raise for all of you, is how do you get developing countries and CSOs more engaged perhaps particularly in the platform, because that is a criticism that I have heard from some quarters, that they don't feel necessarily that well represented. The OECD, for example, represents the richest countries. How do you get developing country voices in, and how do you get CSOs in? And if there are any that are hoping to be more involved in the future, how can you facilitate that?
It's just beginning to happen. And let me mention what we are doing at the United Nations. You know, we have a small committee of experts. They are developing a survey first to collect information from developing countries. What are they doing so far in, first of all, identifying this challenge, how it's perceived, and differs from country to country. And have they taken any measures? Are those effective? If not, what do they need to do? And we have to first collect this information. And I must say, in the UN membership, 193 countries, there is a significant majority which is not even, this issue is not even on the radar screen. The tax authorities are so busy with their own revenue generation and closing loopholes that this is not there. And Vitor's point is excellent. You know, just look at this, countries which are struggling with the routine taxation regimes, ordinary tax collection for the SDGs, and they can't deal with those challenges, and we are putting a very high level in front of them to deal with, and it's not even, anything is not even acknowledged. So what we have done, we are mapping the field, first of all. Do you know this challenge is on the horizon? Are you dealing with it? And what are you doing about it? Then once we collect that data, we'll analyze and share very widely with our partners. And then we'll work together. Biggest challenge is awareness raising, knowledge sharing, and then building their capacity to eventually deal with it. And at this juncture, the picture is very primitive. It's still developing. OECD countries are contributing. They have clear sense where it is going. Some big economies also realize, India, South Africa, Brazil. Others do not have any idea how will they deal with it. So we have just started the process and working with our partners in getting a clear picture and then suggesting solutions and working together to build capacity of countries to deal with this challenge. Thank you.
I think one issue that we're working through as the PCT is how to get this balance right between the work that we do in sharing information, in convening and bringing people together, the balance of that with the balance of the work we do in country on the ground. Each one of us has a set of countries that we work with. At least the three of us have a pretty broad ownership and large programs all around the world. And the OECD also has in-depth relationships, maybe not with all countries, but quite a few, and they're increasingly doing work with developing countries and those who are joining the OECD, which have really rich experiences to show. And so each of us brings a perspective from our own dialogue with countries to help present those voices. In the work we did in February, in the big conference, we had many participants from around the world. We also had a set of, we invited civil society organizations and others to join. We know that this topic is a very important one, both in terms of the fairness and the equity of taxation. The goal of raising more revenue, it's absolutely clear that we don't want that to be at the expense of the poor. And so it's not